This portrait is our first real glimpse of the face of a 19th century warrior. In 1854, this British cavalry officer was captured by a device that would shape warfare as much as gunpowder. A peaceful device, the camera. Yet, the pictures it recorded showed the world a grim new type of war. Men like these were about to face the full force and horror of the industrialized war in a tiny corner of the Russian Empire called the Crimea. By 1854, Russia was already an industrial power. Factories produced giant cannons and howitzers like these at the fortress of Sebastopol. Soldiers had fought with the same types of weapons for centuries. In the 18th century, men fought the American and French revolutions as they had for the past 300 years, with gunpowder, horses, and cold steel. Those who fought at Waterloo in the early 19th century used the same types of weapons and tactics as those used in these earlier conflicts. But Waterloo was the end of an era. After the Napoleonic Wars, Europe enjoyed 4 decades of peace. Although its armies rested, its factories forged ahead. When war broke out again, generals could draw on new technologies: the train, the telegraph, the steamship. The Crimean War started when Russia attacked the ailing Ottoman Empire of Turkey. Fearing Russian expansion, Britain and France sided with Turkey. In September 1854, the Allied army set sail for the Crimea, a peninsula in Ukraine. Troops traveled by steamship, a new means of transportation. It was reliable enough that huge military operations could be launched from afar. Steam power helped land a vast stockpile of supplies and ammunition exactly where and when it was needed. The French and British armies poured ashore. Their first objective was the Russian naval base of Sebastopol. As the Allies set out, a Russian army blocked their way along the rocky heights overlooking the Alma River. For all their industrial strength at the Battle of the Alma, the Russians were armed with muskets much like those used by their grandfathers against Napoleon. Their effective range was no more than 200 yards, less than the longbows used by English archers 5 centuries before. The British and French had a new weapon, the rifle and Minié bullet. Hollow at the base, the Minié bullet expanded into the grooved gun barrel, harnessing the full power of the explosion and leaving the rifle's muzzle with a powerful spin. It had a range of 500 yards, nearly 3 times the lethal distance of the Russian muskets. Russian author Leo Tolstoy was a young artillery officer fighting at the Battle of the Alma. He described the impact of the Allies' rifle fire.
You have only managed to climb a little way when bullets begin to hum around you. All around you seem to hear the various sounds that bullets make, from the ones that hum like bees to the ones that whistle rapidly by, or twang with a noise like a plucked string. It shakes you to the core and inspires you with a profound sense of dread.
With Minié bullets, the British slaughtered the columns of Russian soldiers before Tolstoy and his men could even see them. The Battle of the Alma was a turning point in the history of war. The Minié bullet, a small step in the science of ballistics, made artillerymen firing heavy weapons vulnerable to fire from the infantry foot soldiers. On the open field of battle, the dominance of the artillery's big guns was over. Heavy weapons of the future would have to be protected from the enemy's rifles by digging in out of sight. The British and French advanced in triumph. Near the port of Balaclava, the Russians turned to fight again. At Balaclava, the British commander ordered a cavalry unit to capture a battery of Russian guns. With unclear orders, this unit, the Light Brigade, charged straight down a narrow artillery-lined valley toward the guns at the far end. For an entire mile, the British cavalrymen ran a gauntlet of cannon fire. The Light Brigade took the Russian guns, but couldn't hold them. They were forced to retreat back through the Valley of Death. Of 673 cavalrymen, 247 were killed. Minié bullets and steamships had given the Allied forces the upper hand. At Balaclava, tactics had not caught up with technology. The day of the cavalry charge was already over, and the Light Brigade had to perish to prove it. All over the Crimea, peacetime inventions were finding wartime uses. French officers storming the Russian fortress of Malakoff were the first to use watches, accurate enough to be synchronized before the attack, standard practice on the battlefield ever since. New communications technology was changing war in unexpected ways. William Howard Russell, the world's first war correspondent, reported on the Crimean War for the influential London Times. Russell arrived at the Crimea full of enthusiasm for the war. But as winter set in, he witnessed the neglect of wounded soldiers. Russell's enthusiasm turned to anger.
The dead, laid out as they died, were lying side by side with the living. The stench was appalling. For all I could observe, these men died without the least effort to save them.
From the commanding general down, the regimental colonels, they simply didn't care. They weren't interested. It was an army that basically was willing to sacrifice its soldiers because they fundamentally didn't seem to care.
Back home, the British were outraged. Despite efforts by the military to gag him, Russell's reports helped bring down the British government. They also inspired a British nurse to go to the battlefield. Florence Nightingale's influence on military medical care was simple and revolutionary.
Her great contribution in the Crimea was to clean up the hospital that she was working in at Scutari, markedly reduce the death rate by nursing care, by better diet, by simple cleanliness. When Miss Nightingale came home, she said, "I stand at the altar of those murdered men, and while I live, I shall defend their cause." And she did.
When the war was over, Florence Nightingale's work led to the foundation of the Army Medical School. The Crimean War was the first war influenced by the press. The soldiers portrayed in Roger Fenton's pioneering photos were seen only by a privileged few. But the words of the journalist got through. From now on, the photographer and the reporter would be fixtures on the battlefield and play a role in shaping public opinion.